Every couple of years we get back-to-back movies that I watch and go, yes, that is why I love filmmaking. Last year was a great year for filmmaking. The end of 2018 we got Spider-Verse, we got Marriage Story, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This year has not been a good year for films. I mean, so far we've gotten Sonic the Hedgehog and Cats. So, Sonic wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it would be. Cats was.
Angelicals can, Angelicals do.
In 2014, we got Nightcrawler, the Lego Movie Grand Budapest Hotel, and one of my favorite movies of all time, Whiplash. We also got... but that's a topic for a different video. In 2017, we got Dunkirk, Get Out, Baby Driver, Logan. But no movie from that year sticks out to me quite the way that Blade Runner 2049 does.
You're a cop. I did your job once. I was good at it. I know.
Now, before we get into this, I want to say I'm going to be talking about minor spoilers for this movie, so if you haven't seen it yet, please go watch it. It's a great movie. You won't regret it. Is that in focus? It is now? I cannot believe that they made a sequel to Blade Runner, a movie that in its initial release didn't even do well. But what's even crazier is that I can't believe they made a sequel to Blade Runner and they did it perfectly. This movie is a sequel to a film that came out 30 years prior, and usually when that happens, it's not done or received very well. I mean, look at Zombieland 2, a movie that came out only 10 years after its predecessor, and it became a hollow, empty shell of what it once was. 2049 came out 30 years after the original Blade Runner, and it's done perfectly. And one of the most impressive parts, to me at least, and something that we don't really get to see a lot in sequels to movies, is it's a movie that stands on its own. In my opinion, you don't really need to have prior knowledge of Blade Runner to really understand this movie. It explains itself perfectly. Seeing the original movie might help with some enjoyment of the film, but overall the movie doesn't do anything to drown itself in nostalgia. I mean, don't get me wrong, it does reference the original movie, but not in a way that's jarring or confusing. All of the references to the original movie are subtly explained. I love the original Blade Runner. I do. That movie is so impressive for its time. Even now, some of the things that movie does is still incredible. It is such a visual spectacle. It's beautiful. But admittedly, the gripes that I have heard from the original Blade Runner is that it's lacking in a very fleshed out plot. There's not really a lot going on with the story, and because of that, its slow-paced nature naturally feels a little bit slower. And I do realize there's a lot of social commentary and political commentary in this movie, but the overall actual plot does leave a lot for one to want. There's also that weird scene with Deckard and Rachel that I'm not going to get into in this video. Now, don't get me wrong, I do love the original Blade Runner, primarily for its visuals and creative effects and its score, but it does miss the mark in a few places. Don't get me wrong, it's still a great movie, and if you haven't seen it, I do recommend it, but if you don't like the original Blade Runner, please don't let it turn you away from seeing 2049. 2049 does have a much more in-depth story. It is still slow-paced, but because there's more going on with the story, and there's more mystery behind everything that's going on, it does a really good job at keeping you engaged, even through the slow-paced story. The score fits into this movie so perfectly. I mean, every single dramatic note that's hit with the score matches the tone of the actual movie. Every dramatic, sad beat, you can feel it in the music, and you can feel it in the movie, and they go hand in hand.
When you're not performing your duties, do they keep you in a little box? Cells.
Cells.
Interlinked.
Interlinked.
What's it like to hold the hand of someone you love? Interlinked.
Interlinked.
The score itself feels almost like a character within the city of LA that they built. It's incredible. I adore it. It's so trippy and weird. I love it. The characters are so enjoyable. Joy is precious and near and dear to my heart. Ryan Gosling does a great job in this movie. I feel like he kind of gets casted as this silent, brooding type in all of his movies recently, but in this movie, I feel like it works really well because he plays a robot. All the actors do an incredible job in this movie. I mean, even the side characters are written well enough that you care when they die. The cinematography alone is enough reason to watch this movie. Every single shot is so awe-inspiring. It's honestly one of the most beautifully shot movies I've seen in the last 10 years. And that's thanks to Roger Deakins, an incredible cinematographer. He did the cinematography for 1917, which is a movie that I would also like to talk about at another point. But yeah, every single shot, much like the score, matches the tone that the story is trying to set. Every single shot is so beautifully and intentionally done. It's enough reason alone, honestly, to watch this movie. And of course, the directing is incredibly well done. Denis Villeneuve does a great job here. I haven't actually seen many of his other movies, but I'm going to sit down and watch some of them here pretty soon. He's directing, Dune? Is it Dune? He's directing a movie coming out in the next couple of years, and I'm very excited to see what he does with it. You could tell he cared so much about the story he was telling, and the entire cast seemed to get along with him very well. He seems like a very genuinely likable director. I would say my only real gripes for this movie is maybe some pacing issues and a couple of lines of exposition that just didn't really sit with me. And I know I just praised the movie for doing a better job at pacing than its predecessor, but there's probably a couple of establishing shots that could have been trimmed down a bit. That doesn't mean that the shots aren't beautiful, but it does kind of drag the movie a little bit. I realize exposition is kind of necessary sometimes, but I feel like it can be handled a little bit better. I feel like it doesn't need to be so on the nose. But overall, those couple of gripes don't really do much, if anything, to take away my enjoyment of the film. It was so well done and well crafted, and you can tell everybody that worked on this movie cared about the movie that they were making. If you can't tell already, I love this movie. I've seen it probably 6 or 7 times now, twice in theaters. It did so much to inspire me as a filmmaker and as a writer. It does everything that I want a movie to do, and we're in this era right now where all we get is superhero movies and kind of soulless remakes and sequels. And yes, granted, this movie is a sequel, but it is a sequel that, in my opinion, and I might get some flack for this, it's a sequel that is better than the original, and that is a rarity these days. And then it bombed. Of course it bombed. The original Blade Runner came out 30 years ago. This is a 3-hour sequel to a movie that, at its initial release, didn't do well. It was destined to bomb. But to put things into perspective, it had a budget of about $150 to $185 million, and in its opening weekend it made roughly $32 million. That's not good. The Emoji Movie came out in July of 2017, the same month that Spider-Man Homecoming, Dunkirk, and War of the Planet of the Apes came out. Had a budget of $50 million, and in its opening weekend made back $20 million. The Emoji Movie had about 1/4 the budget of 2049, and in its opening weekend made nearly the same amount of money. And it breaks my heart, because when a 2049 fails, but say an Annabelle, a low-budget, pretty easy-to-make film, is very successful, it makes it more likely that we'll get more movies like that, and less likely that we'll get these strange, innovative, and different films like 2049, at least not with the budget that it had. So there you go. That's my opinions on Blade Runner 2049. It's an incredible movie. I highly recommend it to anybody if you want to be inspired to write something or just see something really cool. I highly recommend it. This is a video that I've wanted to make for quite a while, but just never really got around to it. But I just watched 2049 again and decided now was the time. Let me know if you guys like this. Let me know if you want to see more of this. I feel like I could talk about movies on and on, especially bad movies. I could go on for hours about bad movies. So if you want to see more reviews or discussions about movies, let me know. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. I'll be back in a couple of weeks talking about another movie. So stay tuned for that if you're interested. My name is Matthew Henderson. Thank you.